Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the epic evolution of aspirin. We're going to explore a fascinating narrative that is truly a two-front war. On one side, it's a brilliant story of molecular pharmacodynamics and groundbreaking scientific discovery. But on the other, it's a high-stakes commercial tale full of corporate espionage and fierce industrial rivalry. If you thought the little white pill in your pharmacy had a simple backstory, well, prepare to have your mind blown.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the myths of willow bark, the synthesis of modern aspirin, that crazy World War I patent loss, unlocking the clinical mechanism, and finally, modern trials and future uses. Let's jump right into Section 1, the myths of willow bark.
You've probably heard the classic origin story, right? That Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, prescribed willow bark tea for pain and fever way back in 400 BC. It makes for a really beautiful ancient origin story. But as critical pharmacy students, we really have to ask, is there actual primary evidence backing this up? When we dig into the original texts, the narrative completely shifts.
Actually, translations of Hippocrates don't make any mention of willow at all. Historical records show it was used for entirely different things. For instance, the Roman author Celsus recommended boiled willow leaves for treating uterine prolapse. Later herbalists, like Culpeper, used the burnt ashes of willow bark mixed with vinegar to literally burn off warts. Now, while Reverend Edward Stone did use willow bark for fevers in the 1760s, that ancient systemic use for general pain relief? Yeah, that's largely a modern myth slapped on retroactively after the invention of aspirin. Moving on to Section 2, synthesizing the modern aspirin. So what's really wild about this next phase is Bayer's massive pivot. In the late 19th century, the German chemical industry was absolutely booming, mostly by making super lucrative dyes from coal tar. But as competition heated up, Bayer made this legendary high-stakes leap out of the dye industry and straight into pharmaceutical chemistry. Let's track how we got from organic tree bark to a synthesized blockbuster molecule. In 1828, Johann Buchner pulls yellow crystals from willow bark and calls it salicin. Fast forward to 1853, French chemist Charles Gerhardt figures out the structure of salicylic acid. But the real magic? That happened in 1897 at Bayer. Chemists Felix Hoffmann and Arthur Eichengrun successfully synthesized acetylsalicylic acid. By 1899, Bayer officially branded it aspirin, A for acetyl and spare for spirea, a plant that also yields salicin.
Now, why does this matter clinically? Well, patients had already been taking raw salicylic acid for rheumatism, but it was incredibly harsh. It caused severe gastric irritation. You'd cure the joint pain, but absolutely wreck the patient's stomach. By adding just one acetyl group, Hoffmann and Eichengreen created a compound that was much more stable and highly tolerable. This wasn't just a minor chemical tweak, guys. This was a massive clinical and commercial breakthrough that let Bayer take this drug global.
Which brings us to Section 3, World War I patent loss. This is where the science of aspirin collides head-on with global warfare in what is literally a blockbuster legal thriller.
You have to hear about the sheer audacity of the great phenol plot. To make aspirin, Bayer desperately needed phenol, but during World War I, phenol was being hoarded to make explosives, completely cutting off their supply. To keep manufacturing in the neutral U.S., German agents set up a front company. They secretly arranged to buy massive tons of excess phenol from, get this, the inventor Thomas Edison. This plot kept Bayer's New York plant running for months until a Secret Service agent found a misplaced briefcase. The whole espionage operation leaked to the press in 1915. You literally can't make this stuff up.
And the corporate drama didn't stop there. Once the U.S. entered the war, the government seized Bayer's American assets. After the dust settled, the Treaty of Versailles explicitly stripped Bayer of its trademark rights in the US, the UK, and France. The aspirin brand was so overwhelmingly successful that it suffered from genericide. It just became the generic term for any acetylsalicylic acid medication. It's a profound cautionary tale in IP law, showing how international conflict and sheer product ubiquity can cost a company its most profitable brand.
All right, Section 4, Unlocking the Clinical Mechanism. Let's head back to the lab. Crazy enough, despite its massive global dominance and nearly a century of use, scientists actually had no idea how aspirin worked inside the human body until the 1970s.
Then, in 1971, Professor John Vane, alongside researchers like Salvador Moncada, finally cracked the code. Using some incredibly clever bioassays, they mapped out the entire molecular cascade.
They proved that aspirin dose-dependently inhibits the cyclooxygenase or COX enzyme. This blocks the production of prostaglandins, which trigger pain and inflammation, but crucially, it also completely halts blood platelets from synthesizing a substance called thromboxane A2. This discovery was so monumental, it eventually won a Nobel Prize.
So what's the clinical takeaway here? Well, thromboxane A2 is the exact chemical that causes platelets to clump together and form a plug when you get cut. Because aspirin blocks it, your platelets can't clump. This pharmacological deep dive perfectly explains why aspirin causes that well-known side effect of bleeding. But here's the absolute genius of biology. That exact same mechanism, preventing platelets from clotting, is precisely what protects vulnerable patients against the deadly clots that cause heart attacks and strokes.
And that leads us straight into Section 5, Modern Trials and Future Uses. Once researchers realized aspirin stopped blood clots, it totally opened the floodgates for a whole new era of clinical trials.
In 1974, data from the first randomized controlled trial for the secondary prevention of heart attacks came out. The results, an astonishing 25% reduction in total mortality at 12 months for these patients. That is huge. This finding completely revived the drug. It went from just being a simple household painkiller, struggling against competitors like Tylenol and ibuprofen, to becoming an absolute frontline, life-saving cardiovascular medication.
But the evolution is still far from over. More recently, data has pointed to an entirely new frontier: oncology. A 2011 meta-analysis of clinical trials revealed a stunning 44% reduced risk of dying from cancer for participants taking daily aspirin over an average of 4 years, compared to a placebo. Long-term studies are showing dramatic drops in the incidence of colorectal, stomach, and esophageal cancers. Just think about that. A 19th-century molecule, synthesized as a side project at a coal tar dye company, is now one of the most researched anti-cancer prophylactics in the world.
As we wrap up this explainer, you really have to step back in awe at the sheer scale of this epic story. From debunked ancient Greek myths in Thomas Edison's secret fennel shipments, all the way to Nobel-winning pharmacology and cutting-edge cancer prevention, it leaves us wondering, what other molecular secrets are still locked inside this ancient-seeming, yet constantly evolving drug? And as new applications emerge, how will the next wave of corporate rivalries dictate its legacy, and who gets access to it? Definitely keep those questions in the back of your mind as you look at that little white pill in your future clinical practice. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and as always, stay curious.